So welcome to the Agriton podcast. Thank you, Danielle, for spending some time with me going through some bits about FarmED. My name is Martyn Richards. I'm from Agriton. We've started this podcast to try and explore more about composting, more about natural farming, trying to get more understanding about the bigger picture. So Danielle, can you introduce yourself and tell you a little bit about FarmED?
Yeah, so I came to FarmED 2 years ago. I started as an intern, and it was actually through earthworms that I managed to get a job here. So I quite literally have a lot to thank them for. I had done my undergraduate research on earthworms and how they impact soil health within like a composting system, but through growing tomatoes. But it was basically through my research that I'd heard about FarmED and what they were trying to do here. What our mission is to educate, inspire and connect people about what a sustainable, regenerative, agroecological future of farming and food looks like. We've got a lot of work to do, but obviously that involves the whole supply chain basically. So farmers, growers, composters, consumers, suppliers, bakers, chefs, the lot. We're trying to talk to all of those people because they all have a role to play. And composting and food waste impacts everyone as well, which is really important. So hopefully what will be 2024 is our first zero waste year. FarmED, we are a 107 acre demonstration farm, so quite small, but it's enough space to demonstrate all the different kind of things, practices, implementations that farmers and growers and other like-minded people could implement on their land. It's not to say that what we're doing everyone else has to do. We're simply kind of window shopping for farmers. Exactly. So, like highlighting the benefits of certain things. We're very happy to own up to our mistakes. Not everything works, and even if it works for us, doesn't mean it will work for other people. So as part of that, of our 107 acres, we've got a cafe and education centre in the middle. So the cafe is really great to showcase what good food and local food, seasonal food tastes like.
I've just had some soup myself, so I know how delicious it was. Yeah.
And I didn't tell Martyn to say that. So that's really good. So we can get different kind of audience in, people that won't necessarily think about farming when they sit down and eat their dinner. So that's really important to us. The education centre, obviously we have to feed our people on the courses, so and we know that we're generating around 25,000 people a year, so it's an awful lot of people, which hence means a lot of food, and therefore inevitably you can't escape it, food waste. We obviously try and limit it as much as possible, but veg peelings, they've got to go somewhere, and if someone for some reason doesn't like their lunch, that's where it's got to go.
So what waste systems have you got here already, and what have you got for the future?
So before we implemented any changes, we decided to take a food audit, and we generated just under 50 kilos in a week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that was a really quiet week for us. So on our busier weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to 75, 80 kilos of waste a week. So that was kind of our baseline. So we knew, right, we've got to factor in 50 kilos of waste going somewhere. So we have a vermicomposting processing system on site. It's again very small. My plans are to expand it. But if you're not familiar with vermicomposting, it's just using earthworms to break down organic matter into a nutrient-rich compost. Then we have bokashi, which Martyn is obviously an expert in. We're using that again on a small scale, hoping to expand, have them. And what's really important for us is it's just outside the kitchen, because we know
easy for them to get access and stuff like that.
Exactly. We can't have people, walking with wheelbarrows in the middle of service, trying to cart stuff off. And also we did want to put it in a tumbler, like a container system, just to prevent pests, because being outdoors, a kitchen, we can't have pests at all. So and we'll probably roll out, or we'll continue doing what we're doing now. My plan is, at the moment, my vermicomposting system is simply a council, the ones that the wheelie bins, that's it. And so that's very small. We have actually got the equipment already in situ to expand. So my job is also to get other members of staff really keen.
That investment of people understanding and having some interest in it will make it work.
And for me also what's really exciting is if we get it to work, well it already is working, but we get it, we're really comfortable with it, and we're generating a lot of good quality compost, because that's what everyone wants at the end of the day. I would love to bring other restaurants here, bring other cafes here, so they can learn what they could do to kind of tick that composting or that green waste
Yeah.
part, because last week we had a few chefs from the Oxford colleges, and they were saying they go through about 250 kilos of food waste a day. So
Wow.
I know we think we're quite big on what we're doing, but if you think about the whole of the UK, it's a lot of food waste.
Yeah.
So I would love to get some training workshops done, ideas for funding, or like ways that it can be implemented. And I think the one benefit of doing those three types of composting, each system has benefits, and they can all work together really, really well. But if you've got limited space, that means that vermicomposting might be better, but bokashi is really quick. So if you want a quick turnover,
Composting equals steam. Steam equals carbon dioxide. So
I think it's really tricky when we talk just about carbon dioxide. I know it's a big polluter, big emitter. I think the sources that are quite bad, like fossil fuels, I think that, because that's a source we know now that we have alternative energy renewables that we can use instead. So I think when we're talking about composting, we are trying to do a good thing.
Yeah.
And carbon dioxide is one of those gases that happens naturally. And when you think about the forest floor, when all the leaves fall off in autumn, there's going to be quite a lot of CO2 being respired at that point. But we're hoping that the quality of soil we're creating, the more the trees grow through that rich kind of mulch being applied to the soil, that will then encourage the trees to sequester more carbon dioxide.
We're talking, you were saying about small scale,
Mm-hmm.
and at the moment you're only doing 50 kilos worth of food waste, so your worms probably can process that quite efficiently. You want to get busier, so how does that look in scaling? Because I've done a bit of research, and in the UK, I can't find anything big.
No, I mean, I do know that the XL in London is the biggest vermicomposting system in the UK. We're hoping to expand the surface area of which they're in, but I don't want to get to the point where I'm just relying on them the whole time to process our food waste, hence the other two systems that are really efficient at taking larger quantities. Because the issue is if you feed earthworms too much food, and you'll kind of just keep feeding them. They are animals at the end of the day. Like, you are a farmer of worms. It's not just like a throwaway pet type thing. You need to look after them, and if you feed them too much, the food starts to rot. That's your CO2 emissions, and that means that the juices, the mould starts developing. It's not nice for the earthworms to eat. So there's a real risk of overfeeding your earthworms, and it's not. I don't want to get to that stage, because then you're putting the earthworms at risk. You're not getting good quality compost. It's going to be bad stuff leaching out that you don't really want.
Vermicomposting, and I would love you to do the stats of nutritional value. I was quite blown away by it.
So I think they're amazing. Again, I'm going to be biased on the earthworms. So we use one species of earthworms. There are over 31 in the UK, but we use just one in this case. It's called Uncina fetida, and it's a type of composting earthworm. So you traditionally get 3 different types of earthworms, some that live in the soil, but the one that we're talking about today, it lives kind of on the surface. It doesn't eat soil, it doesn't even live in it. It lives, if you were to find it in a natural environment, it would be under logs, in hedgerows, in leaf litter in a forest, because they need constant additions of really rich organic matter. Whereas that specific one, they're quite resilient because they can tolerate quite a large temperature range. Obviously not freezing, but up to about 2 to 4 degrees, and then up to about 35. So they can double their population in 60 days. So, people often say that, worms are quite expensive. You can buy 30 quid's worth, which is about 500 grams, and you're going to get, you're going to double your investment basically in 2 months. And the thing that amazes me about earthworms is they can pretty much they can eat quite a lot. They can't eat meat, and maybe bokashi can process meat. They can't eat anything acidic, so alliums like leeks, onions, garlic, lemon, citrus, they can't really touch that, but that's where other processes come into handy.
Pre-composting.
Yeah, exactly. Digesting it for them.
Yeah.
And the vermicompost that comes out at the end of the process, 9 months to produce 10 kilos. So, doesn't sound like a lot, did take a long time. But what's really, really important for me is that quality and the quantity of vermicompost, it's so rich that you actually only need if you're, say, using it in your potting mix or as a kind of a top mulch for your garden bed or whatever, you only need a volume of 20% and then 80% your regular soil, because it's so rich that if you want to apply 50%, even the whole hog, it won't have any additional benefit, because 20% is kind of that magic number. So even though we only got 10 kilos, 500 grams, if you dilute it in a worm tea, so just putting it through some water, you can fertilise an acre with 500 grams. So
that's phenomenal.
Obviously that's super beneficial, because we are a small farm, but with 10 kilos you can do the maths. We've got enough to fertilise the whole farm, so that was really exciting. And if I was to differ it from normal compost, which can be great, can be amazing, but with earthworms, because they are animals, they have hormones. And in their guts, when they eat, banana skin, leftover potato peels, whatever it is, when they crunch it down in their guts, they also basically inject enzymes, bacteria, fungi, loads of active ingredients, and hormones as well. And those are really, really important, because the studies have shown not only it increases yield by up to 25% of your crops, water retention, organic matter in the soil, all these great things. It also provides the plants with better pest and disease resilience. So, and that is because when you apply it as a tea in liquid form, the plants can absorb it really, really quickly. And these things called phenolins, bit technical, but worms produce phenolins which help protect the plants from certain fly infestations, because the chemical phenolin gives the plant an unsavoury flavour to the fly.
Did not know that.
Yeah, the flies don't like phenolin. Okay. I'm sure you could get a chemical that does the exact same job, but
yeah, we'd rather not.
Exactly. So we're just basically pumping it full of loads of good stuff that can help, prevent fungal infections, fly infestations, loads of really cool stuff. So not only is it a fertiliser, it's also can act as pesticide and insecticide.
So you mentioned about bokashi, and obviously, again, being biased with all this kind of stuff. In America, I see a lot of projects where they're using all food waste, so meat, fish, dairy.
Feeding earthworms bokashi. Not yet. When we expand to our bigger vermicomposting system, I am planning on feeding them some lovely wood chip that we actually did bokashi together. So my plan is to use that as their bedding. Should be all right. And when we looked at the heap, there's loads of worms in there anyway.
Yeah.
So
I'm only going on what I've seen in the pile that we have here. So we did wood chip, grass, and just our Actifirm and seashell grit, and just laid it and left it for 12 weeks. I had a quick nose actually today just to see what was going on. Still loads of worms, making their way through it. It's interesting because when we talk about these things, there's me saying to you, like, why are you not bokashi? But actually, it's because this is quite a new technology. I know it's not a technology, but it's quite a new system. And I think, especially in the UK, we're at that point where we need to understand lots more about the soil and how the soil works. But we do need people to research. We need people to tell people that this is a right or wrong way. The only problem I have with that personally is that when you have a bad experience with something, what happens.
You shout from the roofs about it,
And when one person has a good experience, they don't really tell me much. So hopefully with these podcasts, we can then, have that information. Carbon. We've talked about carbon dioxide, vermicomposting. How much carbon do you lose in that process? Do you know anything about the emissions at vermicomposting?
To see what information I could find, it's quite limited. I have seen a few papers or articles online, but earthworms, they don't really respire. They breathe through dissolved water on their skin, so that's obviously allowing. That's how they breathe, but they don't really release CO2. The only CO2 that would be being released is from the decomposition of the food. But if you're feeding them right, at the right rate, and you're not letting the food sit there for too long, the earthworms will eat it quite quickly.
One of the things I've heard about vermicomposting is E. coli. And obviously, people are very worried about safety and etc. It is cold compost and it's not hot, so therefore it's not sanitising that. Do you have any information on kind of killing pathogens, etc., through vermicomposting?
I have. This is obviously going what I've read. I've tried to read all the worm literature out there. That will take my whole lifetime. So what I've read is that earthworms are really efficient cleaners. So again, I mentioned before, they have loads of active ingredients in their stomachs and their guts that when the stuff that they poo out essentially is really clean. I've been told by lots of other experts in this field that they've found traces of E. coli, say, in the feedstock of the earthworms, but then the produce at the end, it has barely any trace of it. So I do think that there's great possibilities for earthworms to be as effective as hot composting. However, I don't think that testing stuff is bad. We should always be quite safe when it comes to that regard. But from what I've read, I think that they're pretty efficient cleaners. And
I think, to expand on that, I think the thing that we forget is actually E. coli is in the soil.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
So I think we're at that point in society that maybe we should, again, stand back and think about these things. These rules and regulations that have been put into place are now outdated because technology has obviously expanded, etc. For myself, bokashi, fermentation, I always harp on about, you've got aerobic, anaerobic, and then this other, which is fermentation. But fermentation is obviously, has a bigger scope with things. And the E. coli bit for vermicomposting, my understanding is that's where the scalability is becoming an issue, because obviously with E. coli, the more you expand it, the more possibilities. It's always going to be, that there can be more pathogens through that system. I think with more research, because they are systems that are going to be happening now. I think hopefully we'll see some more results with that.
Definitely.
So bokashi, I wanted to obviously I've introduced you to bokashi with the thing. I myself obviously are quite engrossed in it because I do it as a job, but I also use it at home. Do you think it's a fad?
No, I'd love for it not to be a fad. I can guarantee you that I tell everyone on a farm walk about bokashi and the features of it, and that most of them don't know what, not many people know what it is, but I think the benefit of that is that people question it. They're like, oh, then what is it? Everyone's heard of worms, and some people have a wormery that they kind of just leave be. But when it's something new, something quite different, once you know the very, very basic principles, which don't take that long to pick up at all, I don't think there's a massive barrier. Because when you have worms, people are scared because they're animals and you need to look after them. And I can 100% understand why people forget about them over winter, or they leave them outside and then they will disappear because of the rain hitting the roof of the wormery. So, there are lots of things that scare people about worms, but I think with bokashi, there is such, firstly, scalability. It's very easy to pick up. I love it. I do it at home as well. Which
I'm so proud.
Yeah, Martyn's so well. But no, I get quite smug because every Thursday we get our bin pick up from the council, and our food waste bin hasn't gone out for 2 months. And I know it's small, but to me it really counts. And so I'm just trying to tell more people about it.
And that's the thing is and the reason why I take so much pride in it. I have the same situation. I look down the street and see all these food waste things. And these are gardeners. These are people that are they're very keen, good gardeners. But it's again education. Well, this is why it's about. This is obviously education. So EM, effective microorganisms. So to give the listeners a bit more background, Dr. Higa, who was the gentleman that kind of founded EM as a system, effective microorganisms. It's well known in Japan because that's where the technology is from, but obviously in Western culture it's becoming popular in certain streams, more to do with compost and food waste, etc., and making it safe. But obviously in the UK we're still quite far behind. So with your knowledge of EM, obviously I'm not going to put you on the spot and give you a whole test of everything. Have you felt that that's helped your journey with composting?
I think so. I think when I live at home with my parents, it's my parents' house, I've got to kind of abide by their rules, which is completely fair enough. I was the one that suggested, let's compost our food waste, and their initial reaction was like, oh, pests, rats, what are we going to do? All of these issues. But after everything I've learned from you and from Agriton, I felt that pretty confident throughout the process, as long as you do it right. and you should be able to control those issues as much as possible. I am really, really excited to see how it does fare in my compost pile. I'd love to see it kind of shrink down really, really quickly, and hopefully it has actually done in the past few weeks, which is really exciting. And I don't know what it would have looked like with or without the effective microorganisms, but I think it's great in the household. I really like it, and it doesn't smell as bad as everyone thinks it does.
Yeah.
But no, I really like it, and I can't see myself not using it in the future. So
I think it's the thing with my key question really for most listeners is obviously from my point of view, we're a company. You definitely are not a company in respect to what you're doing with education, and I think people will look at us and go, oh, well, it's obviously a company trying to sell things. Do you feel that from a public's point of view, what's your thoughts on kind of a composting the old-fashioned way, I'm going to call it, compared to adding things to it? Do you think that creates value? Do you think it's something that people should do, shouldn't do?
I think obviously it's a personal choice. I think obviously like budget is a massive problem, like especially cost of living crisis now. It's not the time to be investing in compost tumblers for your home because they cost 500 odd quid. But I think with bokashi, if you are a gardener and you do have a family, producing a bit of green waste, food waste, all of that stuff, I think you will earn your money back with the really, really nutrient-rich compost you're buying, because you can buy kilos of that black plastic stuff, and who actually knows what's in there? And I've, since coming on this composting journey, I've been to other people that they have 2 different types of compost, and they can mix the 2 according to the plant's needs, the season and where it's going to be placed in the greenhouse. Really, really cool stuff. And I think if people really do like to invest in their garden, composting their own food waste is a natural part of that, and especially if they're composting veg scraps from their own garden, they're going to put back on that same bit of soil. It's like magic. Why wouldn't you? So obviously it's personal choice, and I do think that there is a sales element in it, of course, but and you can make your own bokashi, I think. So I haven't tried it, but I'd love to give it a go. But also you need so little.
The savvy people out there are kind of realising that waste can be a resource. So for me, my perfect world would be localisation, etc. What's your thoughts on the food cycle and how you would like to see it in the future?
I think we've got a long way to go, if I'm being honest. If we're just focusing on the UK, we produce 10 million tonnes of food waste a year, and bread is the number 1 wasted household product. I think it's 24 million slices a day.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really, really shocking. And obviously there are some things that are completely out of consumers' control, like what the factory does, for example, how many loaves that's producing. But I think when it comes to consumer choice and reading the label, like smell it before you actually throw it out, like if your salad leaves do look okay, or if they're starting to go a bit mouldy, just pick out the bad ones. You don't have to throw away the whole packet. I think there's a lot of re-education and mindset shift that needs to happen, and a really, really worrying fact actually that I think the government would quite like to hear or take note of is that the UK spends 1% of GDP, gross domestic product, on food waste kind of processing. 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but I googled what the UK's GDP is, and exactly, so 1% is £24 billion a year on food waste. 24 billion. I think like what that other money could be invested into the NHS, loads of other amazing things that really need money. I think the fact that why are we spending so much money and resources? I know these are providing jobs, bin collections and anaerobic digesters and all of these things, but if you think about, say we had more vermicomposting, more bokashi, more jobs on the land working with the compost, we could be creating 24 billion a year for the economy through rural jobs and processing all this stuff. And I just think it's a no-brainer. It's a huge task, huge undertaking, but I think consumer power is a really, really important thing, and if people click onto that and know that they can save money, produce their own stuff in-house, I think that's really exciting.
There are, hopefully in the future, there'll be nutritional value in things. That they're working on a project where they're trying to show a nutritional value of a carrot compared to 1 carrot compared to 10 carrots.
Yeah.
So actually, if you think about natural product of 1 carrot compared to 10 carrots that have been commercially done, the nutritional value of that 1 carrot can be the same as 10 carats. So they were talking about, what about a future where we have energy ratings? So actually you'd have 1 carat at A+ rating, and then for a customer vacancy for 10 carats would also be like a D rating. So that customers can make an informed decision with it. So I don't think people really understand that.
No.
Do you think?
No, and one thing that, so when we do our farm walks around the farm, we like to tell people about how, quite a depressing fact really, how the nutritional density of food, so all those micronutrients like magnesium, zinc, potassium, iron, all of those really, really important things have steadily been decreasing over the past 60 years, whilst the use of chemicals has been increasing, which is no surprise. It's basically the soil isn't doing its job to provide, there's no biology in it to put those nutrients into the food. And what's worrying is that, I don't want to get my facts here wrong, but I think if you were to have 1 orange in the 1920s, you would need 10 now to get the same amount of vitamin C. And that could be an organic orange. So even though you might need 10 of organic oranges, you might need 20 of the conventional ones with all the chemicals applied to actually get your same vitamin C level, which is, it's quite sad.
From a government's point of view, with saving money,
yeah.
actually if you fed and had nutrition that people could have, then in theory, gut reaction thinks that more nutrition I have that I'm eating, the more healthy I'm going to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of a no-brainer, that one, I know, but people don't really see it like that. And what's your thoughts on how councils, there are lots of areas in the UK still not having anything food waste, what's your thoughts on what you have already and what you think the council should do in the future?
I think, starting big scale, I think it's amazing what we've been able to do. I think anaerobic digesters are a really, really important source of renewable energy. If we are producing this much food waste, we might as well put it somewhere beneficial rather than landfill, which, that is a big tick. I don't think we should rely on it. I think that's a really, really dangerous thing to fall into. The same amount of, the size of Wales each year is used to produce food that never leaves the farm. So the farmers are growing it for no reason, because the supermarkets aren't buying it off them, because it doesn't meet the right...
My face is now showing a shocked face, but yeah, unfortunately this is the case.
Yeah, so we're producing far more food than we need to, therefore, there's a massive imbalance. So firstly that needs to change.
Yeah.
I think in the UK and probably Western perceptions of food waste is all of our waste gets carted away. We don't like looking at it, we don't process it, it's smelly, it's nasty, it's horrible, we're not used to touching it anymore, and I think that's a mindset change that needs to happen. Like today actually we were just putting together our compost toilet for the farm, and I think people might go, "Ew, gross, you're composting human manure," but actually we flush 6 litres of fresh drinking water in the UK.
And you told me this today and I was like, I'd never even thought about it.
I know, and that's up to 60 litres a day per person. Think about where that water could be redirected. Why have we got polluted rivers? It's a really, really big issue. So I think we need to be more used to managing our own waste to add value to it. And I think it's that whole, people need to realise the benefit that it can have for them, rather than it being seen as a menial task. So I think, we need to get used to processing it ourselves, because other people across the whole of the world are doing it. Like Argentina, lots of inner city places are doing it, vermicomposting, processing human manure on large scales in a city, because there's no lorry that comes along every Thursday, picks up stuff and carts it away. They don't have that infrastructure. So I think we need to look at examples of other people, how they're doing it. Where a whole county's relying on one place, what happens if something goes wrong? Where does that go? So it just shows the fragility of the system we're in. We need to have more kind of pockets of solutions and ideas to cope with things that they might not go to plan all the time.
I like the cashless system because I see what goes into my bin.
Oh yeah.
And that's money.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, is that when you start to then put value on it, that becomes a big thing.
Yeah.
And we pay council tax, and council tax keeps going up. I would love to see a system where people take ownership and they're educated to be able to do their own food waste in their own systems, whatever that system could be. It doesn't have to be the cash, it could be vermicomposting, it could be hot composting, but be giving them the tools to be able to do that. Your thoughts on carbon credits?
So if we're talking about soil, obviously we know that the soil can harbour a lot of carbon in a stable form, which is essentially what we want. There are global initiatives saying that if we can sequester simply, I think it's 0.004% of carbon dioxide into the soil across 100 years, climate change is no longer an issue. You know, the soil is such a good sink for carbon to store it in a stable form, produce nutrient food. You know, it's a win-win situation. One issue I have is if we are measuring carbon in the soil, there is no one standardised measurement yet to measure carbon. So say if on this farm we decided to sell our carbon in our soil to people that would pay us for it, they might be underestimating the amount of carbon we have in the soil because, you know, the lab says different, or if you send the same soil to 2 labs, you'll get different results. I just think it's a really tricky time to be putting such a lot of money on it when we can't measure it. I think the measurement needs to come first, and there's lots and lots of research and money going into it, but I think it's just really risky for farmers to put all their eggs in one basket.
And it's good to hear that from a farming point of view. You know, we for people that listen to this podcast, could be from all sorts of walks of life, but you know, the companies, big companies, the blue chip companies, that's making nice general, single out people, but there are a lot of companies out there that do something to try and make it good.
Yeah.
But actually the output's, not great. So people that say I'm planting a tree could be planting this tree in the Sahara Desert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, they plant a tree, but actually, what are they going to do to reduce the amount of carbon they're using, because that tree has to grow first before it starts to get...
Yeah. And I think focusing on trees is a massive, again, it's like that carbon. If you only focus on one thing, trees, carbon dioxide, you're forgetting the whole other ecosystem and biodiversity and air quality, water pollution. There's a whole other thing that tree can benefit, not just carbon dioxide. And grasslands can be a great source of a great sink for carbon dioxide, but no one talks about them because who wants to plant grass? No one. So it's a polarised debate, and I think it's just easy money and it's quick. So yeah.
So final one for me. If you were going to give a piece of advice for 2024 to start the new year, what would be your for people in the normal households, etc. What can they do to make a difference?
I would suggest simply start researching. I know that might seem like a lot, but if you simply look at what space you've got at home, I think space and time restraints are the real big, they're very human issues, and I think if you kind of write them down, or you figure out how much time you want to spend, how much space you've got, and if you've got access to an outdoor place as well, that they're really, really key facts. So probably start with those 3 things, and then once you've figured out what you want to do, vermicomposting, top lines, good in a small space, doesn't smell, can produce very rich compost that you don't need a lot of, but it's slow. And if you've got kids, great toy for them to play with. Bokashi, obviously again, really small, doesn't smell. You might need an outdoor facility for that, just to finish off in the last processing bit. But again, super nutrient rich, and again, really, really quick. Obviously doing hot composting, you've got to do it outside, so you've got to have outdoor space and probably a bit of a larger space. So it's kind of weighing up what works best for you. I think question how much food you're wasting in the first place. Freezers are great. You can freeze bread. You can freeze those 24 million slices of bread a day, and it tastes fine in the toaster. So it's really, really simple things. And I think, like we said, mindset and education is a huge thing, because what we find here is once we've set people on that path of education, we've done our job. They will then do their own thing, and we don't have to, get involved and provide any more advice because they're on their journey. But it's just getting people excited about it in the first place. That's the challenge.
So for people that don't know FarmED, where can they find your information? You
can find us on Instagram @RealFarmEd, X, same handle, Facebook also the same handle. Got a website, we've got our own podcast as well. Please come and say hello. The cafe is open 5 days a week. We've got coffee, cake, pizzas on Friday. I can come and show you the compost tumblers, my worms. I'll more than happily give you a tour. And we've got farm walks as well, so come say hello.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Martin.
Cheers, bye.